Alexander Hartdegen, a brilliant but conflicted associate professor, finds himself constantly torn between his work and his personal life. His friend David Philby often reminds him that he's running late to meet his girlfriend, Emma. Despite their close bond, Philby and Alexander often clash. Philby insists that Alexander should focus on his career, especially as an academic, while Mrs. Watchett tells Alexander he's received yet another letter from the eccentric German scientist Einstein. Philby warns Alexander not to entertain Einstein's ideas, calling him a crazy German bookkeeper, but Alexander refuses to dismiss his idol, arguing that Einstein deserves his full support. One evening, after a heated argument with Philby, Alexander meets with Emma and finally admits his deep love for her, giving her a birthstone ring as a symbol of his commitment. But their peaceful moment is shattered when a strange man approaches them, holding a gun and demanding their wallets, money, and jewelry. Emma refuses to part with the ring Alexander gave her, and in the struggle that ensues, the robber shoots her. Emma dies in Alexander's arms, and he is left heartbroken, unable to forgive himself for her death. 4 years pass, and Alexander immerses himself in his work, trying to escape the pain. Philby, worried about his friend, forces himself into Alexander's life once again, trying to help him understand that Emma's death wasn't his fault. Alexander, however, refuses to listen. He blames himself for not being able to protect her and is convinced that if he could just change the past, everything would be different. Determined to undo the tragedy, Alexander reveals his greatest invention, a time machine. He promises Philby that he will change the past and that they will talk again in a week. As Alexander activates the machine, he travels back to 1899, only to be shocked when he sees Emma alive and well. They share an emotional reunion, and Alexander promises to protect her from harm. They walk together, far from where she was killed, but when Alexander steps into a shop to buy flowers for her, he hears a scream. He rushes outside to find Emma has been struck by a vehicle, and once again, he is powerless to change the course of history. Confused and desperate, Alexander uses the time machine again, this time traveling to the year 2030. There, he learns that engineers are working on creating subterranean chambers on the moon for leisure living. In a public library, Alexander encounters Vox 114, a holographic librarian. Vox 114, who is linked to every database, shocks Alexander with its vast knowledge. When Alexander asks why it's impossible to change the past, Vox 114 explains that time cannot be altered, revealing that the idea of a time machine was first conceived by a scientist named Alexander Hartdegen, who lived between 1869 and 1903. Alexander is stunned to hear that his own name is tied to the creation of the machine. Determined to understand more, Alexander travels further into the future, reaching the year 2037. Here he learns that the moon's orbit was destroyed by lunar colonists during an accidental demolition. As chaos erupts, Alexander narrowly escapes an attack, only to be knocked unconscious by debris. When he awakens, he finds himself 800,000 years in the future, on July 16th. 802,701. He is cared for by a woman named Mara, who speaks a strange language that no one else can understand. Alexander learns that the inhabitants of this future world speak in what they call stone language, and they don't believe him when he tells them he is from the past. Mara explains that they are preparing for the Moor Night, a mysterious event, and despite their disbelief, she remains the only one who seems to understand Alexander. Alexander found himself in a strange world where the survivors, known as Eloy, lived in a peaceful village. He met Mara and Kalin, two of the Eloi, who told him their village people were called New Yorkers and that their parents were long gone. The people of the village were mostly young and there were no older people left. When Alexander asked why, Mara explained that they had all passed away. It was a mystery, and Mara seemed hesitant to reveal more. One day while they were speaking, Alexander noticed something unusual. Mara was acting strangely, and the village began to feel unsafe. She explained that it was safer to keep the boats upside down, but it didn't make sense to Alexander. That night, he had a terrifying nightmare about a creature called a Morlock. He wasn't alone. Mara and Kalin also woke up, all of them haunted by the same dream. Mara then explained that there was something special about a place called the Stone Position, and Alexander shared that he was traveling to find answers, particularly why he couldn't change the past. He asked her why there were no older people, but Mara simply said that they had passed away without going into details. In the midst of their conversation, they saw a time machine, and Mara urged Alexander to travel back to his own time, bringing Kaylin along. Just as they were about to move, they heard loud noises. People began running, and Mara dashed to find Kaylin. Alexander, in shock, saw strange creatures, Morlocks attacking the villagers. He witnessed the Morlocks hunting the Eloy, dragging them away mercilessly. Alexander rushed to protect Kaylin, but just as they climbed a rope ladder to safety, a Morlock caught Alexander. Kaylin, in a desperate act, saved him. They continued to flee, but Mara was taken by the Morlocks before Alexander could rescue her. Frantic, Alexander asked Torin why no one fought back, but Torin remained silent. Kaylin finally spoke, revealing that the Eloy knew where the Morlocks came from, but were forbidden to talk about it. He led Alexander to a place from the past, a library system called Vox. There they met Vox 114, a remnant of an ancient system that had stored the knowledge of the past. Vox 114 explained that the Morlocks were evolved from humans who had descended underground after the moon shattered. The Eloy and Morlocks were the results of the human race's evolution, separated by time and circumstance. Vox 114 shared that the Morlocks came from the east, and that Alexander could track them by their breath. He gave Alexander a task: find Mara and save her. With renewed determination, Alexander sent Kaylin back to the village to light a fire, while he ventured into the Morlock's lair to rescue Mara. But his journey wasn't easy. He accidentally fell into a cave, where he found Mara imprisoned, and the Morlock leader confronted him. The Morlock leader explained how the species had evolved after the moon's destruction. They were not always monsters. They had become like this after the planet changed. The leader admitted that the Morlocks didn't just hunt the Eloy, they also controlled their thoughts and used them for food. Alexander, shocked, argued that the Morlocks were once human too, but the leader revealed that Alexander's presence in their time was not by chance. He was the result of his own past mistakes, and the time machine was the key to his future. The Morlock leader offered Alexander a chance to return to his own time, but Alexander, with a deep sense of resolve, decided to fight back. In a final confrontation, he manipulated the time machine, pulling the Morlock leader into it. The machine twisted, distorting time, and causing the Morlock to age rapidly until he was no more. Alexander, now in the distant future, found himself in a world of desolation with a rusty sky and ruined caves. He traveled even further into the future to rescue Mara, and together with Kaylin, they escaped to the surface. The explosion from the destroyed time machine wiped out the Morlocks once and for all. In the end, the Eloy took a deep, collective breath, free from the fear that had haunted them for so long. Alexander, Mara, and Kaylin, now safe, began a new life. As they bid farewell to their friends, including Mrs. Watchett and David Philby, Alexander knew that he had found a place where he could finally find peace and happiness with Mara and Kaylin.